Welcome back to Two Gay Dads, episode 12, in an episode we're calling Parenting by Wi-Fi. We are so sorry that we did not produce an episode last week. We had a crazy week in Washington, D.C. for our normal full-time jobs. That included a board meeting. And honestly, we just ran out of time in a busy week. But Nate, what was we did get some good food while we were in D.C. What was your favorite meal out that we had, Nate?
My goodness, I had, what was it called? It was a French dish. It was like white beans and meat, and it was very good.
I would say for me, when we went to the Bombay Club and I had the duck dish with our friends, with Zach and Walter, like that was incredible. Listen, what are we going to talk about today? Well, we are going to talk about screen time issues. It is a ever controversial thing. We are starting to examine Lizzy's screen time, and if anyone has any ideas on like actually decent screen time apps that lock the pad down, because what Apple produces natively is not there. Lizzy's already figured out how to override it, and how it's related to 90s sitcoms and movies we were watching. And we're of course going to talk about the fact that I am obviously not home. I am in Chicago, and Nate is back home. So we're going to talk about how we're doing this when it feels like we as parents are two parents passing in the night, and an incident that happened at dance class that we had to deal with that the stress of Lizzy having one parent constantly gone is starting to have on her. So we'll talk about the travel jungle. And, of course, we'll talk about what's in store for this week and the gay agenda. Nate, you want to give any previews on that?
We're going to talk about Stonewall and the pride flag, and we're also going to talk a little bit about Jesse Jackson and some stuff I didn't know about his relationship with the gay LGBT community and his support over the years.
So that's what's in store for you. So, Nate, your signature.
This is Two Gay Dads. Let's get into it.
So, in talking about screen time, Nate, the other day you told me the story about how you were watching Madea with Lizzy for the very first time. I'm a big fan of all the Madea movies. It's just they're hilarious and they're funny and they're uplifting. I think you were watching Medea's Destination Wedding, and Lizzy had some questions that she was watching with them, and they got both of us thinking about the movies and shows we watch with her, especially now that she's getting older, and those questions are getting bigger and more thoughtful. So, like, what stood out to you about that moment, Nate?
It was just interesting. To be fair, I didn't set out to watch a Madea movie with Lizzy. I happened to be cruising through all of the apps, trying to find something to watch, and an ad for it popped up, and I was like, sure, I'll watch that. She was supposed to be in bed, but
shocker,
she wasn't. So she came up and curled up in my lap, but she did ask some interesting questions. I think especially in these times when we're looking at these bans on certain content or on drag shows for kids and stuff, but then you have mainstream movies like Madea and Mrs. Doubtfire that you are going to bring up questions, I think, naturally.
I love Mrs. Doubtfire.
Well, and I want to be fair. Like, I feel as though by them making these bans, it almost makes these conversations more complicated than they really need to be.
Yeah, because let's be honest, the content bans, right? First of all, in some states, showing Madea or Mrs. Doubtfire would probably get you or I a fine, if not put in jail.
I don't think it's quite that bad yet, but it's getting there.
Check the Florida laws, right? Like they are solutions in search of a problem in the void of any real solutions to other problems facing everyday Americans. But we're not a political show. We're talking about parents. And I do think you're right. Like, my parents had no problem with me watching Mrs. Doubtfire from a young age. I have no problem with Lizzy. I still think it's one of the top 5 comedy movies of all times, and just shows the genius, may he rest in peace, of Robin Williams. I mean, he was a generational talent, right? Pull off that role and to do it with such authenticity and his voices, and like, who cares, right? I mean, at the end of it, but like, what were some of the questions that Lizzy asked you, and then how did you respond as a papa?
And likewise, I think that Tyler Perry is a genius in what he does as well.
100%.
And I think, we don't have to be political, but these things do affect us. I was just thinking when you were talking about, we were in Orlando for a conference, and Lizzy was traveling with us, and we were going to go to one of those, like in the LGBT community, brick and mortar, like been there for...
we went to Hamburger Mary's.
Yeah, Hamburger Mary's. And we went with Lizzy, and it didn't even occur to us that there was a drag show. And so luckily we showed up right at the end of it, and they looked panicked almost when we walked in with our, I think at the time she was 3-year-old, because they were just wrapping up, and in Florida that's illegal. And so, what we think of as part of our community, people who aren't part of our community and don't understand the context, and they themselves are sexualizing something that is not at all sexualized, are reaching into our community and stealing part of our identity and pieces that we would love to share with our kids. You think of the drag. There are, of course, drag shows that aren't necessarily
kid friendly,
and those happen late at night. But there are a lot of great programs being run by the Sisters of Perpetual Peace, I think is what they're called. They do amazing work in LGBT community with kids, and the drag queen, reading hours and things like that. So you don't have to get political, but it is important. But that is not what we're talking about here. And I'm sorry, I kind of went off on a tangent there. She did ask, is that she was trying to understand the relationship between Tyler Perry, the actor, and Madea, and why they talked similarly. She had all these questions, and it was interesting to try to navigate that with her a little bit, and help her understand that they were, this is the same person. He acts as other characters too, and to appreciate the artistry in that, not just the objectification of it, but also like, hey, one person can play all these different characters. Isn't that amazing for a kid who's growing up in an environment where she wants to be part of the theater and she wants to do dance, and that means that she's going to interact with a diverse number of people.
It makes me wonder though because we haven't shown her Mrs. Doubtfire yet, so maybe we should have a family movie night when I get home and actually watch Mrs. Doubtfire with her, because the Tyler Perry movies are, again, they're fantastic, but it's one person playing multiple characters. I wonder what her reaction will be to seeing Robin Williams being one person. He's still playing multiple characters, but you see the transformation, because that transformation from, I forget what Robin's character's name was, but from that character, from the fun dad who was maybe not attentive around other duties, and was more interested in being the buddy dad than the father figure, to Jebediah Doubtfire, is different. So I wonder if she'll see that.
I think, I would rather that she see these. I think there are a lot of movies out there where there are actors who display other characters in a way that, not to overuse the word objectification, but kind of objectify them or play off some of their characteristics that I wouldn't necessarily, that can promote racism or sexism and things like that. And the thing I like about the Tyler Perry example, and the Mrs. Doubtfire, is the characters that they create are distinct. They have their own identity. There's a respect from the artist for the character that they're playing. And if I'm going to show, a man in a woman's in woman's clothing in a cross-dressing type situation, I would rather that it be in a situation where she's going to learn to respect the part of the artist, to respect the character. So I think those are really good examples that we can, if we're going to show her examples, those are the ones I'd like for her to see.
Like, I think back in, to 90s television, I believe it was the mid 90s when Mrs. Doubtfire came out. The speech that Mrs. Doubtfire gives at the very end of the movie, that talks about all the different types of family and how cutting edge that was for the 90s, really shows a level of respect. And, in some ways, there were other shows that showed families in different lights. Full House. We just got done watching Full House and Fuller House with Lizzy, 90s and then 30 years later. But like, what an idea of three men raising three daughters for a show with Uncle Jesse and Joey. Like, there could have been some connotations, and there wasn't. It was very pure and it was very innocent. But that, even then, like, we were being pushed gently in ways we didn't know culturally through these shows that were showing families in a different light or a different general makeup. And this is, we go back and we've mentioned this before, but about how much representation matters. Right. I mean, the Cosby Show, and I know we have no love lost for Bill Cosby and the predator that he is, but the show was the first show to show a Black family who were doctors, who were highly successful. That was in the 80s. And that wasn't what was on the TV back then. It was families that looked like not even like ours, like the families we grew up in, not families that were showing, successful people of color who were making it in the world. Like that wasn't the word. So like these cultural shows and the creativity that they're trying to stymie in certain places has been like, it's always been there, and it's always been something that's pushed us. Even if you go all the way back to the 70s and you think about Archie Bunker and All in the Family and Rob Reiner, may he rest in peace, and the character that he played in the show that Archie always called the meathead, who was the liberal. But even that was cutting edge. Even that was slowly showing more and more segments and more diversity. That is like, diversity is what makes this country strong, not what makes it weak.
Well, and there's a famous episode where they address homosexuality, and I think it was, I never watched Archie Bunker, to be honest with you, but in that show, there was a great episode. They dealt, they did, over time, they've dealt with it over and over and over again. One of the things I do like about Full House is, especially in those early episodes, there weren't women necessarily in the picture, and it showed that men can play emotional, and that they can be the playmate and the caretaker. And I think like that, I love that was, I think that they had to introduce women to keep the story going and to change the dynamic of the cast. But in those early episodes, it goes to show all these folks out there saying, yeah, to have a mom and a dad. And there were women that came in and helped guide the girls, and that is not unlike the situation it will be in as Lizzy grows older. But it does show that those three men, or that those men can carry the weight of both mother and father from the traditional vernacular in those relationships. No, but I will admit, I have been reliving my childhood with Lizzy, because
what have we moved to since Full House ended? What are we watching
she's watching
now?
Home Improvement.
And she loves it.
And she loves it. And it's fine. I tried, what was the show? Family Matters. I think we'll come back to it. She didn't hook on to it. But I am like reliving.
We just watched the episodes with Stefan. Like,
that's true. I am
like, that's what we were watching the episodes with. Anyway, Stefan. Thank you, Jamal White.
I have been, kind of working through my TGIF night, those shows that we watched when we were kids, because I know them, so it's fun for me to rewatch them, and she watches them and enjoys them. And the best part is they're like, 17, 20-minute episodes.
Yep.
So we can watch
quiet time show.
Yeah. So we do it quiet time. She gets ready for bed at 6:30. We watch during quiet time. We can get through an episode, and then off to bed she goes. So it's actually been really great. But I have been enjoying rewatching some of those. I think Boy Meets World might be in the run-up coming up.
I was literally just thinking about that.
Sabrina the Teenage Witch. I think Lizzy will really
we can pass on that one. We can pass on. I mean, if you can watch that one with Lizzy while I'm traveling, I have no desire to watch that one. The other thing I'll say, since it's been a while since we've talked about shows that we're watching, by the way, Nate's still super hooked on Traitors. He still likes it. He won't admit it, but he won't let me watch the show without him. So
I'm balancing it with The Industry, which is kind of dark.
But I'll also say, and we have to thank your parents for this. Last week while we were in DC, they took amazing care of Lizzy for us. We're so lucky to have your family as such a nearby support system when we have to both be traveling for work. But they got her into the Olympics. And so every night, Lizzy is asking to watch the Olympics. And so we've watched skiing, we've watched bobsledding. What she told me last night before she went to bed is that she wants to be an ice ballet dancer. So I think that means figure skating. She's going to have to choose, because I can't be a dance dad and a figure skating dad. That just seems like way too much.
Not built for figure skating, Dad.
No, you're not built for the ice rink, so it'll be too cold for you.
I'm going to go back to this. I'd love if she just stayed in her room and read books. I don't know why this has to be so hard. No, I was just thinking back to, just overarchingly the content that we've let her consume. We tend to be a little bit of a TV family. I know that's, not in vogue anymore, but we are both, kind of TV watchers, and what we let Lizzy watch. And I grew up, I don't know about you, I grew up in a household where we were allowed to watch whatever our parents were watching. And I remember as a pretty young kid watching movies like Mission Impossible and
Under Siege.
My mom was in the Navy, so I watched Under Siege as a kid, and and not understanding all the parts of it as I understand them now. But I grew up on that, and I think we've very much kind of done the same, or headed in the same direction with Lizzy, which is we'll watch stuff with her that maybe other folks wouldn't. But I was never, restricted and censored as a kid. I had friends, you can't watch, I can't watch a rated R movie. My parents won't let me. And I was like, I don't have those rules at home. But my parents were also like open if we had questions and they would let us ask them. And, we've done good with Lizzy if we're watching something and it's like, okay, can you look at Papa right now? Just
I
something that
think
maybe if there's a
it's the
part we don't want her to
balance.
see. Yeah.
It's the looking at that, or it's also like taking cues from her. Like there have been things where I can't remember a exact example, but I know it's happened multiple times where she's looked at either one of us and said, "Daddy, Papa, that scares me," and then we move on to the next episode. We don't want her to have nightmares or bad dreams. She comes upstairs complaining that she had a nightmare enough now, and she's only been asleep for 35 seconds.
And she's watching clowns on YouTube.
Yeah, I mean, YouTube kids, like
YouTube kids.
YouTube kids,
and I
right?
monitor what she watches. And there. And hey, listen, there are kids shows. I watched a show that was designed for kids that I caught her watching, and the kids were calling the mom fat. And it was just like, nope, we're done. And so I banned. We were not going to watch that show again. So there's always kind of letting her have the freedom or letting her feel like she has the freedom to watch YouTube Kids, but also I do keep an eye on what she's watching and I'm always listening because stuff works its way in there. And it may not be necessarily in a larger picture where people think it's negative, but it's not necessarily the education I'm going to let my kid have.
Absolutely.
So as Jason said, he's in Chicago today and I am at home. and we thought it would be interesting. We've touched on this before, but to kind of go back and have a little bit of a conversation about what it's like to have dual traveling parents, what it's like for us, what it's like for her, how we all cope with it. I'm looking at, I was just counting the day. Over the next 15 days, I'm gone 10 of them.
Who do you think you are, me?
I know that's usually your MO, but yeah, it's been
that is usually
crazy.
my.
And how we track it all, how we figure out, how we manage just being parents on the go. So I did put some prompts, up in our scripting just to kind of get us talking about it because it is an interesting topic, but I don't want it to be too serious.
I mean, I think it's just listen, we can all tell travel horror stories. I have airline travel used to be this glamorous thing. I also feel like for some people, if you have a job where you don't travel, you want a job that travels. And if you have a job that you do travel, you just want to be home. So sometimes it's the grass isn't always greener standpoint. And airline travel is certainly not what it used to be. Even if you travel a lot like we do, you have a frequent flyer status, you have status at a hotel. There's just nothing like being at home. And I think that, I've done this current job that I've done for 11 years, and that's 120 nights a year on the road. I love what I do. I love my full-time normal job. I feel like it makes a difference in the world, but it felt like until 5.5 years ago, like we didn't care. It was extra perks for us to travel, go do things, but it is harder when you're away. And I think, yesterday, you've got to go down and see your family in Ohio next week. That's where you'll be. And you and I had a conversation last night about, when do you want to leave? Because you just don't want to be gone from our child. We chose to be parents. There was no whoops, we're pregnant. We chose to be parents. And so we want to make sure we're there, but we also know, and I think this is where we got to give ourselves some grace. We are able to provide an incredible life for our kid because of the sacrifices that we make when we are, away from her. And I feel like my dad traveled a lot when I was a kid. He would leave on Monday or Tuesday and come home on Thursday or Friday. And a lot of the weekends were spent with family time. I think our kid's doing okay, but I guess if I had to wave a wand and say I wish something was better, I just wish the experience of travel was a little more predictable and a little more enjoyable. I fly through O'Hare every week. That airport's a nightmare. It is a 24-minute flight from Grand Rapids to O'Hare, and you'll spend 47 minutes taxiing to your gate to then wait another 45 minutes because your gate's not open. It's like in the last 92 minutes that I've been sitting on the ground and texting, you couldn't find another gate that's open. I think that's the hard part, which is
well, I think though, in this, we are working to we did get to the point where we realized that this is too much. And that's why we're moving back to DC, because that means that I won't have to travel as much because my travel is primarily to DC. So I won't have to travel as much because we are recognizing that it is coming at a cost to her. And so then that means that you'll still be traveling, maybe a little bit less. But we looked at, I was just thinking about like last year, what was it? In October, you were home for like 5 days all month. It's just,
Yeah.
and, I was talking to our friend Luis.
And it wasn't even an election year. I mean, it was. Every year's an election year, but it wasn't like a midterm or a presidential election.
I was talking to our friend Luis, and he was talking about, when he and his husband met, they thought about having kids. And Luis is a pilot, and he said one of the deciding factors for them and why they decided not to go that route was, he's like, we realized that our lifestyle isn't conducive to having a kid. And so I think that there are folks who are in a situation who have decided not to have kids. That's not the choice we made. And there are plenty of traditional families out there where one or both of the parents travel. I don't think that we're unique in that, but I do think that, you have to find ways to work through it.
And we do, right? There are things, when I travel, one of the things that we've established is I FaceTime with Lizzy twice a day.
Well, yeah, we both do when we travel.
Right. But like I am one of the things that I am, whatever time zone I am in, which is not most of the time, not the Eastern time zone, it feels like. I set an alarm and I am up at 7 a.m. Eastern time and I FaceTime with Lizzy right before she gets on the school bus. And then I talk to her again at the end of the day before she goes to bed and before whatever evening activities my job has me doing that night. And so I do think that there's some technology things. Like I remember talking to my dad, he would call from the hotel room. I have no idea what those long distance bills were like back in the day when you would pick up the phone and call, and like we can text and talk all day. Like I don't know how my mom actually did it, because like my dad would leave and she'd have the hotel phone number that he was going to be at, but there were no cell phones, there were no car phones. There was
text like you.
It was just waiting for that.
Yeah, we were texting constantly. We're on FaceTime. Like, yeah, we're always in communication. I don't know how she did it.
God bless her.
Lizzy is obsessed though with the FaceTime animals. And she'll ask, like, can we do FaceTime animals or whatever the emojis are? And she likes to turn herself into a, lobster or whatever.
Unicorn's been her favorite lately.
Yep.
So what's your favorite, like since we've moved to Michigan, Nate, your travel has really picked up. What's your big parent travel hack? Like if there was a parent of a 2-year-old sitting across from you and they just got this job that they were going to travel much more frequently and this was all going to be new to them, what's the parenting travel hack that you've developed that you would share with them?
I think the one thing that we've learned is we have to make her part of it. Now, maybe our way of doing it and bringing her back gifts is not the best way to go about it. But I think like we had talked about this, finding ways to make them feel like there's a part of them going with you that, for Lizzy, usually when I'm traveling, I wear one of her hairbands around my wrist. And we talk about it and it's something that I take with me, but just bringing them so they feel like they're part of it. So they're not always feeling left behind, but that they're there with you in part. And I think that's been important for her to feel like she's there with us. And when we have a chance and we're on a FaceTime, like, hey, look, here's the White House, or, showing her where we are and explaining to her. I think that would be the one thing I would take with me. Part on them, I guess.
I really liked, before we got our house ready for sale, we used to have and we'll put it back up when we move, but we had the map of the United States and we each had a magnet. Yeah. And so we would move the magnet. So I would sit down on the floor with her, and one, it helped teach her geography of where different places are in the United States, but then she could know where I am. She could go look at the map to remember where I was. And so that was really fun. That was your idea, to try to make it easier, because Lizzy does, it goes in flows like with everything else and goes in phases with kids, and she's been in a little bit of a clingy phase right now about not wanting either one of us, whoever's going to go. And there is nothing worse than when you're trying to get out the door to get your flight and you've got a 5-year-old hanging onto your leg crying, saying, don't go. That's a challenge.
And we did when she was younger, when she was smaller, we ran into issues where we had to juggle around like when we leave her or how we deal with that. Like we wouldn't if you were leaving, you weren't the one that took her to school. You said goodbye at home. So then she didn't feel like you like abandoned her at school, because we dealt with a little bit of issues where
We
she
did.
felt
Yeah. She,
abandoned and would act out. And so we had to kind of figure out, oh, okay, daddy can't take her to, as much as you want to spend every second with her, it's better that papa be the one that takes her to school and picks her up. So we did have to navigate some stuff like that. And like, listen, this is not easy. We live an hour and a half from the airport now. We have had all kinds of crazy stuff, driving 4 hours to drop her off at my family's and then driving to the airport. And then 12 hours later, you come home and drive, down to Ohio and pick her up. Like, we've had to do some crazy stuff. Kid transfer in the parking lot at at Meyer, which is a store here in the Midwest, in the parking lot at Meyer, so that one of us had just gotten off a plane and the other one had made a plane. And like, listen, it's also hard for us as a couple. I tell the story all the time. We had a stint I think a couple of years ago, where we were both traveling and we wouldn't seen each other for 3 weeks. We were literally passing, and
at the airport,
I
100
dropped
miles from home.
Lizzy off at school, and you were picking her up. And we have amazing friends like our friend Kelly, who we call and we say, "Hey, we're not going to be in town. Can you be the parent? The
in-town parent."
The on-call adult for us. And the only reason in those 3 weeks that we got to see each other is because your flight was delayed. So we happened to be at the airport at the same time. And I think we had all of 5 minutes that we got to see each other in 3 weeks. So it's hard on marriages too. Like and so I can only imagine what it's like when you're little. And for her, it's the way it's always been. We have these great pictures. We used to go pick you up at the airport. We have this adorable picture of you guys out of the airport that I love, because when Lizzy was young, like little.
That was when she
just
able to walk.
And so, and those are wonderful memories that I have of going to pick you up at the airport. This has always been her life, and she's always been a resilient kid. I think other kids might not handle it as well too, and every kid is different. And I know we say that all the time. We got to keep saying it. Every kid is different.
Every kid is different. And I think the other thing to just think about when you have parents who travel a lot is the reentry process. And that can be, I think there's what you want. And like, I keep coming back to, again, Kelly, this infinite font of wisdom. And when she shared on the show, the decompression time that kids need, well, that can experience itself when someone's been home or gone. And so what you want when you come in the door is your kid to drop everything and come running to the door and give you a big hug. And I would say 95% of the time, that's what we get with Lizzy. Lizzy will be right with us. Oh my gosh, Daddy, you're home. Yeah. That's what I got when I got back from DC on Saturday. Right? Like that's what I experienced. But there are some times where she's a little colder, and I think just like everything else, like this is one of those moments where when you kind of reentry, you've got to meet the kid where they are. I know you say it all the time. You and Lizzy get into a routine. I come home and I disrupt the routine. You're a routine guy. I don't care about a routine, but
but I would say, I think treating kids like, hey, listen, sometimes when you come home, I'm super clingy to my spouse. Sometimes when you come home, I'm like, why are you bothering me? So I think why, in our heads, we think somehow children are supposed to be different, but they're not. Sometimes they are hot and cold. And to your point, we have to give them the space to be the little humans that they are and to deal with their emotions, not in a way that's inappropriate or destructive, but in a way that we can work with them and help her come out of her shell a little bit. But there is a bit of a whiplash sometimes for all of us. And we try to do good about sometimes the last thing you want, when you come home after 2 weeks on the road, the last thing you want is for me to meet you at the door and be like, okay, here's your kid. I'm going to go take a nap, even though that's what I want to do.
But sometimes you need that. And to be fair, we've both done that to each other. We'd be like, I'm out. I need a break. Right. And it's
we try to let each other sleep in.
Yes.
That's usually where we've met our detente. So I think traveling with traveling as parents with kids, it can be challenging. It's definitely workable. You just got to find the stuff that works for you. One of the things that's been really important for us, we have a household calendar. It is mostly up to date. I have to yell at Jason maybe about once a week to remember to update the calendar, but that
maybe once a month.
And we have the big skylight.
Maybe once a month, not once a week.
Okay, we have the big skylight.
And then you go through and you hear your phone go ding, 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 ding.
We
yesterday.
We have the big skylight calendar. on our kitchen counter. Everything goes in the calendar, so that helps us then when we get the flyer from school with an event coming up, we put it in the calendar and it's like, okay, who's going to be here? Who can do this with her? And so I think that helps us find that kind of rhythm, which is really important for her.
The AI within Skylight, so that you can take a picture of the flyer and that it puts the event on the calendar, is incredible. And so, hey, Skylight, if you want to sponsor the show, you'd be more than welcome to. But this is unpaid advertisement. But the Skylight calendar, and our friends Aaron and Caitlin, they actually had one before we did, and they vouched for it. And so that's partly why we went out like, okay, this is someone who uses it. So the color coding, I know you don't like the app. I think the app is just fine, but it is incredibly useful to be able to see like who's doing what and know that I'm purple, you're blue, Lizzy's yellow. We've got all of the color coding out there that we need. And that is super helpful, the travel calendar. And again, I think you said it, Nate, traveling parents, like it's becoming the norm. It just requires the same deal of intentionality as every other aspect of parenting. And, one of the things that my friend Karen from work has shared with me is just remember, Jason, that it's quality over quantity. You can spend every day with your kid, but if you're always just on your phone and you're not engaging with them, that you might as well be on the road, as opposed to when you come home and like we thought through this upcoming weekend, we have very intentional plans for what we're going to do as a family this weekend, so that the three of us are spending time together. That's not in the house. That's doing fun family things. And so it's just, again, it's a different level of intentionality around another thing, because to be an attentive parent, I think everything comes with intentionality.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with that.
So Nate, in the gay news or in our gay agenda this week, we've got some happier things, some victories. And at a time when it feels like the world is dark and gloomy, sometimes there's some things that are happening that we need to remember the victories, even if they're small, and celebrate them. So Nate, talk to us about Stonewall.
So the flag is back up. The pride flag is back up at Stonewall. But if you don't know what Stonewall is, and some of our viewers might and listeners might not, Jason, can you give a little bit of an overview?
Yeah. So Reader's Digest version, the Stonewall Inn was a LGBTQ bar in Greenwich Village in New York City, and it was welcoming and safe space. Now, it's very important to not whitewash the history of the Stonewall Inn. That was a welcoming for diverse crowds. It was there were a lot of lesbians that frequented that bar. There were a lot of trans people who at the time would have been called cross-dressers who frequented that bar, who were the staunchest, earliest advocates for gay men, especially during the AIDS crisis. And it was under Barack Obama's presidency, because of the Stonewall riots there that happened in the 60s. And you can go look that up for yourself, what they are. We'll post a link to it in the show description. It was put on the National Historic Registry of Historic Places in this country.
So if you don't know, the National Park Service removed the pride flag from Stonewall.
Guess who ordered that to happen?
So it is back up in a temporary way, and advocacy groups are suing to have it returned to its rightful place as part of the monument, pointing out that culturally relevant flags and historically contextual flags are often used on historic sites like Confederate flags and other things like that on national monuments, that removing the pride flag is singling out LGBT people.
Selective enforcement.
Yep, and that it should be returned to where it belongs. I did also see in an article that I caught today that Democrats in the Senate, led by Schumer, have introduced legislation that designates the pride flag as a congressionally authorized flag, preventing any future presidents from removing it from federal sites like Stonewall. So it's really sad to me that we have to legislate to get these people to stop hating.
First Amendment.
But that's where we are. And this is not, this isn't just Stonewall and LGBT people, though. If you caught, I think the city of Philadelphia or advocacy groups there suing because they removed slavery references from the president's house there, that's going on too. Like, they are just rewriting history left and right, but we're not going to let them whitewash LGBT history and remove LGBT references from an LGBT historic site. Like, it's just bonkers to me that these are the fights that we're having to have with these folks. It's like something out of Gilead.
I mean, I think it's the concerning part is this isn't one instance. This is a pattern, right? So you had the FBI agent who was fired because he had a pride flag on his desk. And it wasn't even during the Trump administration. It was a photo from before the ban was put in place that they went back and retroactively fired him. It's the removal in Florida of the rainbow crosswalks because they might distract drivers, but the checkered flag sidewalk in Daytona Beach by the speedway is fine. It's a crosswalk. I don't think a crosswalk is distracting a driver, whether it's checker painted, whether it's rainbow painted, or whether it's just, but it is a symbol. And they've done this in front of the Pulse nightclub where 49 souls lost their life in an act of hate and murder. We've been there, right? And so like it's the needless targeting to a race culture that's not straight white male dominated. Again, it's the selective enforcement, right? We shared earlier a couple episodes ago about what Salt Lake City did about adopting the pride flag and the trans flag and the Black Lives Matter flag and all of these other flags as official city flags so that they could fly them because the state of Utah wanted to ban any flag that wasn't like the POW MIA flag, the state flag, and the United States flag. And what just has me baffled is if I'm a conservative, which I am not, I'm about small government and less regulation and letting the free market economy do its thing. But you want to regulate what flags are displayed on municipal buildings, on government buildings. You want to tell a city what their crosswalks should look like. Where is the small government that they claim to have with less regulation? If people don't like the rainbow crosswalks that, say, Fort Lauderdale had, then they would be free to not go to Fort Lauderdale. Wasn't that the whole argument over the Baker's case? So I don't even understand. This isn't conservatism. This isn't republicanism. This is authoritarianism and creating a country that looks like it did 100 years ago with the laws and the culture and the makeup, not the country we've been striving to become and fighting to become, in our recent history. And it is.
And by the way, it didn't look like that. That's just the glorified parts that they want to remember.
Correct.
It didn't. Correct. It never looked like what they want to pretend it is.
If I hear a boomer say, "Let kids be kids," one more time.
Let kids be kids while complaining about kids being kids. Yeah. It's,
right. They ran through my yard. Like, Jesus, really? You know how many yards I ran through? I used to, in Ludington where we live, we used to play games of hide and seek and ghost in the graveyard that covered a 5 square block radius, and nobody cared. Today, I'd be afraid to let Lizzy do that because I'm afraid that some wackadoodle with a gun would shoot her for running through their backyard.
I had this conversation with my dad. He was, driving. He has a 4-wheeler, and we were down in the in the forest and kind of riding through trails. And he was, waxing nostalgic about when he was young and all the trouble that they'd get into on their trail bikes or, motorcycles. And then some kids rode past the house and while we were sitting on the front porch on their motorbikes, and he got all up in arms. And I said, but don't you see that this is let kids be kids? It's you always say let kids be kids, and then you complain when kids act like kids. So yeah, boomers, calm down. So that's I wanted to talk about that. I'm really excited to see the flag back up, and I love
beautiful ceremony.
I love that it was an act of protest by the people of New York saying you don't get to decide what happens here. But it's really sad to see something as like even the National Park Service becoming politicized, and not in a way that builds people up or promotes diversity or that celebrates the history of the country, but in a way that celebrates really nasty hate and destruction of a national identity. So it's really bad and sad and frustrating. But I also wanted to talk today a little bit about Jesse Jackson. I didn't know all that the role that he played in building up LGBT people and building an environment where the people that would reshape LGBT rights in this country in a lot of ways, or build the political infrastructure that would continue on LGBT rights. And listen, he had his own demons. Yeah, he had his own demons, and so did a lot of those politicians. But yeah, just an incredible guy. So just some interesting stuff. I was reading an article today and out of LGBT News. And so just some quick stuff. While many members of the Rainbow Coalition see it as just having unified Black and Brown communities and the poor, it did also They were deliberate about bringing LGBT Americans in as a central part of Jackson's vision, not an afterthought. He also used his national platform during his 1984 presidential campaign to argue that the rainbow includes lesbians and gays, and that no American should be denied equal protection under the law. He spoke in 1987's National March on Washington for Lesbian and Gay Rights. He consistently supported LGBT rights across many decades and celebrated the 2015 Supreme Court ruling affirming marriage equality. And although he never secured nomination to be president, his Rainbow Coalition laid the groundwork that helped elect Bill Clinton, secure Al Gore the popular vote, and ultimately sent Barack Obama to the White House. So he really did help the Democratic Party evolve into a modern and diverse space. And like I said, that built the foundation upon which the LGBT movement was able to make gains in the early aughts. So well done, Reverend Jackson.
He was a stalwart for our community. He was there before it was popular. Our friend Steven from Rainbow and Black talked about some of the homophobia that can exist still in communities of color and how it needs to be addressed. And he helped lead that charge to make it better for everyone. He was a central figure to helping Barack Obama come around on marriage equality. And, I know we mentioned that he supported all of the legal efforts, but he also helped organize against all of the early 2000 bans that wrote hate and discrimination into state constitutions. He embodied what it meant to believe in the saying that until all of us are free, none of us are free. And he lived that. And so, Reverend Jackson, for a life well served as a dedicated and faithful servant, thank you for all that you did to make our country and our communities safer and better. Please rest in power, my friend.
Absolutely.
So, Nathan, as we wrap up episode 12, what did you learn from our daughter this week?
So, something I felt like a kind of cruddy human yesterday. It's just something that didn't occur to me about having a 5-year-old. Our friend, as I said earlier, our friend Luis was in town for an appointment, and he stayed at our house. Yesterday we got Lizzy up and got her ready for school, and off she went to school. And it never occurred to me that that there was no moment where we actually had her say goodbye to our friend. And, I think we get used to having a little who's not paying that much attention, but she really took it hard that she didn't get to say goodbye. And then I started to think back to like when I was a kid and how I felt when that happened. So just note to self that we have to be a little bit more intentional about making sure that she gets to say goodbye to people when they visit. And it never, like I said, it never occurred to me. You get used to them being little and not paying attention, but she's paying attention now, and it really hurt her feelings. So note to self, do better and grow going forward as a parent. What about you, Daddy?
So I'm going to just share an example of, something I mentioned earlier because it was on my mind because it was the recent thing that we learned. And that is reentry can be tough when you travel. And when you've been gone, sometimes all you want to do is go see your kid. I think every parent can relate to that. Nathan's parents had let Lizzy stay up later, it's a weekend, so I had no school the next day, to welcome me home. And she did. And I got the biggest hug and I heard her feet hit the floor and I heard her scream, "Daddy!" And my heart was full. And then I got some great snuggles and then she went to bed. I contrast that with the week prior when I came back. She barely looked up from her iPad. She's like, "Oh, you're home." And as a parent, trying to be intentional of meeting them where they are and recognizing that both of those reentries are okay, that your kid needs to process when you've been gone. And there are times when they're going to be like, "She's okay." I'm like, to me, that was just like, oh, that's what it's going to be like when she's 15 and I come home from a trip. Like, "Oh, you're back. Thanks, Dad." Right? Get back to ruining my life, would you? Anyways, it was just another reminder of there are times where, just like everything else, we have to meet our children where they are, and we have to go meet their expectations, not have them meet our expectations, especially when it's something around like how you wanted to be greeted when you came home. So that is what my kid taught me this week.
Or what they want to wear to school, because we had a whole thing this morning about what our daughter was going to wear to school.
And she looked really cute.
And I met her where she was. I wasn't altogether too happy about it, but it turned out okay. I convinced her to wear the shirt that matched the pants. So that was my small victory this morning. But yes, I absolutely agree, honey.
All right. Well, that is it for episode 12. It has been a pleasure to be back. But once again, we're sorry we missed you last week. If you haven't liked or subscribed to the podcast, please make sure you do that so you never miss any of our important updates. We'll be back next week with some special guests from Ireland.
Really excited.
Oh my gosh, it's going to be great. Until then, it's going to be great. It's going to be great.
He's Jason. I'm Nate. Have a good week, everybody.
Onward.
Onward.